Welcome to A Leader's Journey podcast. I'm your host, Joel Gunn, and Darryl Lyons is back on the show with us. We had a conversation that if you haven't watched it, I'd encourage you to watch the first part of this. Darryl covered some really good stuff that I'm not going to bother recapping here because I want to spend most of our time talking about the topic of your latest book. I know there was a lot that motivated that, and so I want to give you as much time as we can on that one because I really think the audience needs to hear what you have to share on the topic. I got to hear you speak on it a couple of months ago in a short segment, and I think it's important the message gets out. So welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah, the biblical responsible investment. We talked in the earlier show about during COVID, I got bored and I got my master's at Texas A&M Law School. They had a really great online program, and it was specifically focused on wealth management. So it was a bunch of attorneys that needed to dive into wealth management a little bit more. So it was Masters of Jurisprudence. So we had a paper to write. And at the time, my conviction was I was on Goldman Sachs Advisory Council, and I was working on with some other big companies. And I was trying to convince them. So I'm doing my studies, and I'm trying to convince them that they need to consider the magnitude of the Christian market when they construct investment solutions. And I was trying to make the case. And at the time they were going through, there was all this other stuff, all the stuff that they were thinking about and doing, but they weren't considering the magnitude. And even they were undermining to a certain degree the body of Christ, Christians. So what I wanted to do was in my paper, I wanted to just make a case that these investment firms, BlackRock, Goldman Sachs, companies that I was talking with, that I had good relationships with, I still do, I was trying to convince them to pay attention to the Christian marketplace. This is a real marketplace with real needs and a lot of wealth. So I was building out that paper, and it really fell on deaf ears. So I the good people, but at Goldman Sachs, but then some of them left, just corporate shuffling. But I look at the paper and I go, okay, I have a book here, but I reconstructed it so that the consumer, you and I, could understand it, not just executives. But when you read it, you can actually see how I was trying to make a case to executives as you read through it. But I was trying to make a case to the consumer now, not necessarily a case, but just give the consumer an awareness that this Christian marketplace, when it comes to colliding with money, is very interesting. And there's actually some unique motivations that Christians have and unique financial tools that are in the marketplace that a lot of people haven't connected the dots with. As an example, even though it's called biblical responsible investing, there are sections on healthcare. So it's amazing now that the Christian sharing market is doing what it's doing. I have to give God the glory there. My son, he had a terrible illness, and it cost our family over $100,000. He's healthy today by the grace of God, but over $100,000 were paid by these Christian sharing organizations. Right now the middle class is really struggling with health insurance, and it's costing somebody $1,500 a month for a family of four, and their deductible is $10,000. But these Christian sharing programs, it's like $600 with a $300 deductible. General numbers, but it's amazing what's happening. I'm like, people don't even think about how amazing this is. So that's a chapter in the book, and then it goes on to other things like we'll move on to even proxy voting, how now Christians are actually voting their shares and how that's being done mechanically. So there's just some really cool things that I wanted to articulate, and the book's really thin, that were really important for me to kind of piece together and say, Christians, check out what's going on in the money marketplace. And I lay it out in such a way that hopefully it inspires, encourages, and gives families some direction.
I just want to give a shout out to the Christian healthcare sharing concepts. My wife and I, outside of her having, our three kids in a hospital, I'd never been in a hospital, neither had she, other than those. And we both ended up in hospital 8 days apart. And after those 8 days, between what she dealt with for 5 or 6 days in the hospital, what I was there for a couple of days, $350,000.
It's crazy.
$350,000 for basically 7 days in the hospital.
It's insane.
2 or 3 for me, and 5 or 6 for her. 7, 8 days in the hospital, $350,000. And we're part of a sharing network. And our total out of pocket was a few $1,000s when it was all said and done. And if that, honestly. And then, but yeah, it was, and what was interesting to me is I was in a network here in town that's very well known, that's still managed by a church denomination. And she was in one that has the name of a church denomination, but actually held by a secular organization. And both of them, I had about 150 plus, and she had, well, I guess I was closer to 200,000. She was 150,000. And both of them received and processed really without too much drama at all. And the one actually, when I said, well, I'm with a sharing network, and they said who, and I named them, and they're like, oh yeah, no problem.
Wow.
Here's, fill out this one piece of paper.
Yeah.
And we'll go ahead, and that'll alert our financial department that you're part of a sharing network, and we deal with them all the time. They're great people to work with, and the secular organization was like, yeah, okay.
Wow.
And so
that's really cool. Yeah. It's really phenomenal. And obviously it's not perfect, right? So,
Sure.
But it's those types of things that I think, like, I just want Christians and, even the secular community recognize, hey, pay attention to Christians. We hold 55% of the world's wealth. So, and there's unique needs. Mm-hmm. And unique aspirations and motivations that are completely different. I in the book I talk about this, but it's like we're playing checkers and the world's playing chess. Not to say one's better than the other, but it's just two different motivations. Like the world literally says, I say literally because kids say literally all the time, so now I'm saying it. But the world says, okay, whoever has the most amount of money when they dies wins the game. Mm-hmm. Like that's the world. And by the way, I've talked with thousands of people about their money. They may not express that, but that's really what they're doing. Mm-hmm. They're trying to get as much money as possible. Whatever the motivation is, that's their motive. That's their goal. Their motivation could be, I didn't have any money when I was a kid, or I want to outdo this guy. They just want a bunch of money. Christians, on the other hand, tend to have other motivations. Sometimes we weave in and out of American consumerism, mm-hmm. but generally speaking, there's different motivations, typically rooted in a way that we could honor God and love our neighbor. And so how can we do that with the money we have? And so having two different motivations requires different skills and different tools. And so that makes it fun to write about, mm-hmm. Biblical responsible investing. Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned in the first episode with me that you were living in a mobile home as a young person. I actually had the same experience, and so part of my drive for success was to make sure my kids had a different experience.
Yeah.
Right. But then, transparently and candidly, part of it was also I wanted more, right? Mm-hmm. And so the American consumerism kicked in. Now, that being said, we also give out of every paycheck, to the church and to charity. We give of our time. So we practice those things that Christians are supposed to do.
Love it.
So I've wrestled with quite, on air here, I've wrestled with, okay, am I giving enough? Am I saving enough? Am I, and I go on a mission trip to Mexico, and I know you've got a nonprofit in Moldova, and so that's near and dear to your heart, making a difference in the world. Mm-hmm. But I go on a mission trip, to Mexico or something. I come back, my closet's too big. I got too many clothes, too many shoes,
I know.
too many cars, too big a house. Anywhere I've traveled in the world, I come back with that feeling. You said in the last episode, you talked about being a certified behavioral financial advisor.
Yeah.
How do you walk people through that behavioral wrestle, especially Christians that are like, do I give it all away? Do I keep some?
Giving it all away is asceticism. God doesn't want anybody to give reluctantly or under compulsion, right? Mm-hmm. We know that. I don't want to over scripture this, but we know in Timothy it says he didn't give us a spirit of timidity, but in boldness. And then the other thing is a sound mind. Mm-hmm. So what I prefer to do is kind of map it out for people and say, okay, we need to make sure that we take care of you. And I'm not saying that we're not trusting God. I'm just saying we're using our sound mind. So we need to accumulate money to make sure down the road, just in case your heart goes out or you have a stroke, that you've got some money squirreled away. Okay, so that's that box checked. Now, while we're doing that, we've got to give, and the standard of giving, even though tithes mention like 40 times out of 2,000 different scriptures about money, it's only 40. But we'll use the tithe. I mean, it's pretty good, 10%.
It's a starting place.
Yeah, you could give more, you could give less. It's up to you. Like, there's no condemnation here, but don't do it reluctantly or under compulsion. But let's figure out how to give money away along the way. And it's good for you in a lot of ways. And so it's really personal, but it is using a sound mind. So mapping that out and thinking about it critically. The opposite of using a sound mind, here's the opposite of that. And some people can be kind of in between. Sound mind, mapping it out, kind of unpacking with an advisor, crunching numbers, that's smart. The opposite of that is that, this is how I feel today. Today I'm going to give away a bunch of money, or today I'm going to save a bunch of money, or the market's up. That's what teenagers do. Like, that's nonsensical, especially when it comes to money. So rather than just kind of, just haphazardly doing it or doing how you feel, or maybe you just read an article and you react to that, that's nonsense. And Christians are going to lose if there's a win or lose. They're going to lose in the world of money if they don't use a sound mind. And so that's part of my responsibility to say, we just need to map this thing out, think through it critically, pray through it, but not just use our emotions and just make it up as we go. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question?
You did.
Okay.
So are there, one of the reasons people come to an advisor is to get a uniquely tailored plan for their unique life. That said, are there any kind of general things that you see would be biblically responsible or biblical responsible investing? Like, are there kind of maybe somebody's not ready to trust an advisor? Win them over. Like, what are some things like they should be thinking about, weighing if they're not doing? Go talk to somebody about it. Why should they think about it?
So I mentioned Ramsey's story in our previous episode. I think people should see an advisor when they get through some of those baby steps.
Okay.
Like, there's a certain place where, hey, you need to get out of debt because you're a slave. I mean, if you have debt, you're a slave to that debt. Especially right now with inflation happening, credit card debt's going up and savings are going down. So we need to, as America, we need to get a handle on that because that's a ticking time bomb. But if you can get your emergency fund and your credit card debt under control, then see an advisor, because you got to save 15% of your gross income for retirement. You have to. Okay, Darryl, retirement's not biblical. I get that. It's mentioned once in the Old Testament, but the reality is people are living longer, and you need a pile of money just in case your mind or body doesn't allow you to get a job anymore. I mean, we're being very practical here. You need a bucket of money, because at one point in time when retirement was defined, if you want to talk about it, it was a German guy, and you retired at 65 and you died at 68. People are now living in 90. Okay, and you can't go get a job as a busboy anymore at age 85. It just doesn't work. So you've got to get a pile of money, and you've got to plan for this thing. This is just the reality of life. So we've got to save 15% of your gross income. That's pretty much the number. So that's where an advisor comes in and says, okay, I'm going to help you save 15%. I'm going to do it in a tax efficient way, Roth, IRA. And then inside of that, we're going to find the investments that make the most sense. And some of those investments include mutual funds or exchange traded funds that screen out companies that are behaving antithetical to a biblical worldview. So there's several different layers. Okay, saving enough, finding the right tax strategy, finding the right investments, and then screening out the right investments. So there's a couple different layers that an advisor can help with.
But the first thing, and what's interesting is you and I both know people, and you probably way more people than I do, but I've met millionaires that could hardly control their monthly expenses that actually went to Ramsey to try to get things under control.
Oh yeah.
So they'd rather go to an advisor and say, hey, and look at me, I've got this personal financial advisor and I'm investing. And if the advisor was fair and honest, it'd say, you can't even, you're spending everything you're bringing in.
Yeah.
You've run into that, I'm sure.
Yeah. I've had to tell families you need to sell your house, and that's hard.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is hard.
Yeah. You have too much house and you can't afford it. And, there's ratios, like your house payment can't be more than 25% of your take home pay. So I just look at those ratios and I go, you just can't afford it. And so, yeah, we just have just doing it a while, you can see some of that stuff. And It's tough because most of the money decisions, I have a podcast as well. It's called Retire in Texas. It's my shameless plug for the podcast as well.
Love it.
But I had 50 interviews with retirees on that podcast. And every single one of those interviews, I unpack how their childhood had dictated their financial life story. Mm-hmm. And I just connected the dots for every single one of them, sometimes live, like they hadn't connected it before. But, we have to kind of go there. That's a little bit in the behavioral finance stuff. It's because you have to understand, why am I making decisions like this? It's not uncommon where somebody says, I grew up in a military family and we didn't have anything, special. It was always kind of beans and rice. And so as soon as I was able to buy a car, I'm going to buy a nice car. Okay, well, now that we know the why behind it, let's ask ourselves if it makes sense in the context of your personal situation. And that's part of the behavioral finance that we've got to do. It's kind of crazy. We're counselors and psychologists at the same time, math people. It's a weird thing.
Yeah. Have you ever had somebody, and if so, how did you handle that? They come in, they hear you, and they just flat out like, not going to happen. I'm not prepared to be that disciplined or that.
Yeah.
And how do you process that with them? And what's that do to your heart?
Oh gosh, I take it. I've gotten better, but it's rejection to me. It was rejection that I had. I mean, it was really painful rejection every single time. And getting fired by somebody or not being hired, I took it personally. Not getting mad at them, but I took it personally as though I was less of a person because they didn't hire me. And so that was something I had to work through, that insecurity, and God had to do a work on that. And so that's been a long journey. In fact, I talked to some of the advisors about that today that work at PAX, and I try to help them recognize, hey, just because they said no to you, don't take it personally. It's something that they're, something else going on in their lives. Mm-hmm. And so I'm glad that I'm in a position to be able to coach people kind of working through that, because it wasn't fun.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's probably a lot of professions, right? That getting those no's are never fun.
Oh, yeah. It kills me.
Well, and especially you've seen the fruit of what you provide people, right? Like you can really set them up for success financially in the process that you help them wrestle with, maybe some psychological things, or, as you just said, and then knowing that, hey, I've got something that can really change your life. And then no thanks.
Oh, and I remember sometimes going, man, I know it's because I said that. I'm such an idiot. Why did I say that? So, but you learn.
So your book's been out a few months now?
Yeah.
And what kind of feedback are you hearing from the marketplace?
It's been unbelievable. Yeah, I've gotten great feedback. A lot of people like it because it's short. Oh, it's great. I can just kill it in just a couple evenings. So it's been wonderful feedback. A lot of interviews across the country. And the only challenge that I have with book launches is that I'm not interested in doing a book tour. Like I'm not interested in going around the country and going and speaking at different places. And that's really what it takes to hit some of those major lists. And maybe that'll be an ambition for me in the next chapter of life. But those 4 kids are my priority. Sure. And so I don't want to be out of town every week. And so for the degree that I invest in the marketing and the efforts, because most of my marketing efforts are in podcasts, I've been very pleased with the results and the feedback. And so I actually get most excited. I love it when Christians read it, but I had a very successful hedge fund manager read it who's a secular, playing chess. We're playing checkers. He's playing chess, totally playing chess. He's all about the big bucks. And he read it, and I'm thankful for that. Like that is a blessing to me that he read it. And so now I think it's just going to open a door for a dialogue about his life and what that really means. And he's divorced and just making, just very, I would maybe call it selfish, but very worldly decisions, about money and ambition and status and stuff. And I think I put a pebble in his shoe with the book.
Good. Yeah. Somebody listening to the podcast or viewing the podcast, what's a good question they could ask themselves to determine if they have a healthy relationship with money?
That's a good question. One question, it depends on their context of where they're at in life.
Okay.
One question that's a tough question is how much is enough? Mm-hmm. Obviously, for some people that's irrelevant, but other people it's how much is enough. So let's, on that, because the subsequent question you're going to ask, if you've got a lot of money, how much is enough? Okay, it's X number of dollars. How much do I leave for my kids? And then what do I do with the rest? So those are kind of subsequent questions. But on the other end, you've got some people that, don't have a lot of money and, doing their best. I think people on the other end that may be struggling with money, they discount what God's doing generationally. And so I think it's asking the question, what are you doing generationally here? Because you may be struggling with money and your kids are watching you and their lives will be impacted forever. And if you look at a lot of the great success stories, it was rooted in that family dynamic where a family was struggling. And that is a gift. Like, it's a gift for a child to see that. And I would not ruin that. In other words, hey, we don't have enough money for groceries this time around, so we're going to have to eat leftovers, or we're going to have to eat something we don't like. Embrace that. I know it seems like it would be something that would be like, I'm a failure as a person, but it's a gift from God. It really is. I mean, that's where I'm here today because I had conversations about not having Christmas. And the God I serve is very interested in generations. And so I think that's discounted, and I know it's not easy. But I think that's discounted. We discount the value of that generational impact when it comes to money constraints within a household.
Yeah, the word struggle came to mind as you were explaining that. I think we Gen Xers tried to protect our kids from the struggle financially or at school or winning the sports award or not winning the sports award, like whatever we could do to disconnect them from the struggle, the pain. And I think we did them a disservice. And that's been your experience financially.
It is. It's hard for me too, with a family, and we're doing better than we did. There's many times where I said we didn't have money for that. And then now I tell my kids we don't have money. They're like, Dad, whatever. I know you're just trying to play your Jedi mind tricks with money. I'm like, okay, here's what I really mean. So I, do my best to create an environment of constraints and the struggle. Like, it's hard to recreate that. And so, I've done research on this, and I don't think there's anything been conclusive on what I've identified and how to help manufacture a lifestyle of struggle. But what I have identified that I think is really good, at least for us, and I think for others, is having a lot of mini conversations about money is healthy. So just a mini conversation. You take your child to the grocery store, and they go and they pick out a bag of chips, Doritos, and they put it in the grocery cart. Not a big deal, right? That's not a big deal. You can afford it. But the key element to this is saying, how much is that? I don't know. Well, go back, and I want you to figure out how much it is before you put it in there. It's those types of little conversations that matter, and it comes with giving. It's being transparent. It's having conversations about taxes. Those little conversations, what in my research has been one of the better replacements if you don't have that struggle.
So you've really piqued my interest, and I'm hoping this is a future book maybe in the works here. Because I know so many wealthy people struggle to pass that appreciation on to their kids. Like I struggled to get to this point. I've protected you from the struggle, thought I was doing the right thing. Now you don't understand or appreciate, sending them back to get the cost on the bag of chips. One thing I used with my kids, and I was trying to be funny, but also teach them a little mini thing, was they come up and I was like, well, how much is it? It's only $1. I was like, what? It's only $1? And they're like, yeah. I'd get this big, they're 8, 10, 12, somewhere in there. They get this big grin on their face, like, great, you buy it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's only $1. You can afford $1. Like, but Dad.
That's a good one. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. I'm learning that with even teenagers. I've got an 18 and 16-year-old. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge is trying to generalize this because, people have asked about how do you recreate this struggle, as you mentioned. And it's having the many conversations and having, just gamifying it to a certain degree. But then you add a variable, and that's a spouse that didn't have the struggle.
Right.
You're like, okay, now then you've added the variable of grandparents. Like, I know before I was having my son save up for a video game system, and all of a sudden one showed up. Okay. Then you add the variable of kids with unique different personalities. All 4 of my kids are different. I've got savers and spenders. So the idea of creating an environment that's formulaic for reproducing a struggle is a challenge, one that I would eventually like to write a book on, but I'm still living it.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see. So one of the things that I might have stolen this from Ramsey. I don't actually know the origin, but another little mini lesson, so to speak, about money that I would do with my kids is like sleep on it.
100%. Yeah.
Right. And so, Dad, I've saved up. I'm ready to buy the electric scooter, or whatever it was, the fad toy that year. Yeah. And I was like, okay, great. They've got it in stock. If you really want to buy it, no, I really want to buy it. Again, 8, 10, 12, 14 years old. I really want to buy it. You got the money? Got the money. All right, let's go home. Why? Well, make sure you want to spend the money tomorrow.
That's huge. Yeah.
And I would be a man of my word. I'd take them tomorrow. I was like, hey, let's go. Where are we going to get that thing? I've changed my mind.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. That, with the one-click pay in Amazon right now, I mean, it's intentional to eliminate any friction today. And so
it's a brilliant marketing thing if you're Amazon.
It really is. And it's being recreated across the board. So we've got to train ourselves, all of us, to just stop and think. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been at a conference and somebody mentions a book and I buy it. Now I got stacks of books. Where did I get all these books?
Guilty.
Why did I order? I know. I'm telling you because I knew you'd empathize. Well, so we have the same problem that our kids have.
Sure. Only with books, though.
Only with books. Nothing else.
That's right.
So it's a challenge that we have to figure out, and it creates leakage in our financial lives.
Any besides those practical examples, any other tools or resources that you found that are helping parents have those kind of conversations? Because my kids are all one's about to be 30, the others are mid-20s. So
yeah,
these are older conversations for me now. You've still got a couple of teenagers, so it's still current with you.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, it's time to grow up and start saving. I mean, the reality is they need to have a Roth IRA.
Okay.
They need to have a Roth IRA. Is going to allow them to save money that will eventually be completely tax-free when they retire. And so they got to start saving now. Social Security will not likely be there. It won't be there in the same form or fashion that Gen X or the baby boomer generation's receiving their Social Security. It'll be completely different. So starting a Roth IRA is important. Sometimes sometimes when people aren't good at saving, they just need to have life hacks. I mean, it's like putting your gym clothes by your bed because it's just a life hack, right? You need life hacks. So what's a life hack? Okay, I can't discipline myself to save. I'm just going to have it automatically drafted each month or for my 401k and make it a lot of money. And so those are the types of things that some people in their 20s need to start doing. Yeah,
I didn't have the exposure to somebody like you as a young man. And I actually started working in Fortune 500 world, wrapped up my first degree at 19 and started working for Fortune 500. And it was actually an older gentleman in the company started to explain to me a little bit about why I should invest in a 401k, and so I guess probably more sensitive to the topic of our schools don't teach this stuff, and your kids are fortunate because they're married. Yeah. You're their dad.
It's annoying, but yeah,
it's annoying, right? Sure, dad's the guy. Yeah. But what are your thoughts about how do we change? At least I had to write stuff in a checkbook and I could see how much money I had left.
Yeah.
Right at 16, I had my first 15, 16, I have my first checking account. But they've got an app. Let me Cash App that to you. Let me Venmo that to you. They never see their bank account. Are you finding any concerns there or answers there or both?
It's definitely a different environment, right? Checks versus Cash App and all that. But and even Bitcoin's a big deal. The public school systems have, and as I'm speaking to what a lot of people would say that's the obvious, really have not prioritized things very well. There's more tangential things that they prioritize over money management. And so Ramsey's made a bold attempt at trying to get some of his curriculums into schools. I've worked with some technology companies that have gotten their curriculum into schools. But when I was helping with the tech team, I noticed that, and I found this to be the case in many of them, most of the technology that was implemented in the school system to teach were sponsored by credit card companies.
Oh.
And so you weren't able to really make the bold proclamations that were necessary to encourage the right types of behavior because of the money source. And so that becomes problematic, as you can imagine. And so Ramsey's course can only go so far. He's a small business. He's 1,100 employees, which seems big, but
compared to
it's not
the
Visa and
financial
MasterCard.
giants.
Yeah. So right now, I think the school system has priorities wrong, and then when they're trying to offer something, it's not the right stuff.
Have you found a place parents can go to help educate their kids?
Well, I love, Financial Peace University is a no-brainer. I think all kids should go through Financial Peace University.
Any particular age that starts to really click for kids or teenagers? Or
I think 18. Yeah, I would go at age 18. Really, I'm thinking when you get a job.
Okay.
Because then things will start to make a little bit more sense. So my son went through it when he was 18. And, I started to use an online tool. It's $99 a year called Monarch Money. And that's a good way to start organizing your money to see it. And it's got nice user interface that would resonate to the next gen. It's more than just an Excel spreadsheet. So it's for $99. I would encourage somebody who's trying to see what their money's doing to use that tool. It also has a good chart that shows net worth, because poor people look at tax returns and rich people look at their net worth. And so starting to get them to see their net worth increase is really important.
Does that interface with the bank, or is this just like a planning tool?
No, it interfaces. It uses Plaid and pulls the data securely from all the financial institutions. So from your banks and your 401ks and even Zillow and automobiles too.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't sell it. I just use it.
Yeah. Well, I've been looking for a tool, because even though my kids are in their 20s and they're more financially aware, I think, than most of their peers, I still feel a little bit of responsibility. Like I could have done a better job in that.
Yeah, there's another one out there called FaithFi, which is cool because it has like scriptures and it's encouraging certain types of Christian behavior. My problem is just doesn't do as well as I want to support a Christian business, but Monarch Money just works better for me.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to check it out because I've actually said for several years, if I can't find an app, I guess I'm going to have to write one because I've got some ideas on how. Well, anyway, that's for another time. But yeah, if you come across anything, keep me posted. What about and just kind of some final thoughts here? It seems to me like this is a huge void. It's great that our generation's figuring out our finances, and maybe the older millennials are figuring out their finances. But we really, with the absence of tools like checkbooks, and I remember even as a kid in public schools, we were introduced to basic checkbook and some of that basic stuff. And like you said, it's been replaced by other things, because there's only so many hours in the day. Are we doomed? Like, I mean, is this a financial apocalypse waiting to happen? Or is everybody just blow it till they're 30 and then go, hey, I got to figure something out?
Well, it's kind of interesting because the next gen, according to what I read, is less ambitious. It's more about doing good in the world and having a purpose. And so I think what we're going to see is really when we talk about managing money is one thing, but also making money is another. And so it's not an issue if you don't have money. And so I think where I get concerned is just the thought process of how that next generation is going to make money. And there seems to yet be an adoption of the old school, I'm going to do it in a methodical, long-term way. Let me give you an example. I was at a school career fair, and nobody was coming to my booth. Financial guy, there's doctors and all kinds of toys. So I was by myself watching the market on my phone. And this little girl comes up to me, this is 5th grade or something, and she goes, felt sorry for me. She said, what do you do? And I told her I'm a financial advisor. I help people make better money decisions and help them retire and transition to retire and then not run out of money. Telling her, giving a little speech, and she's like, that's fascinating. I'm going to hire somebody like you when I become a YouTube star. And, it dawned on me that maybe there's not a money management issue. Maybe there's just like a reality of life and when it comes to earning money issue. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's the one that concerns me more today is just what does it look like to build a business long term? And hopefully we see the next generation kind of appreciate and adopt the habits of just having a long-term grind versus I'm going to go put my money in Bitcoin and make a ton of money. I'm going to be a YouTube star and make a ton of money. That's nonsense that tends to have low probability. So really, I think about the concerns on more of the shovel side, having the right kind of shovel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Darryl, it's been a pleasure having you back. Any final thoughts you want to share as we start to bring things to a close?
No, I always tell people you think different when you think long-term. And so I just want to encourage your audience to continue to think long-term. And sometimes that's generationally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And do you feel like Christians carry that weight more than say, the secular world? Do we feel generational?
I hope not, because they say...
I mean, in a good way. Like,
yeah.
do we...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think so too. I believe that to be true. I know that there's some people like, oh, they're on their own. Good luck, and no, it's a wonderful thing. It makes makes it just really special for the body of Christ to be concerned about our children, our children's children, and when you leave an inheritance to somebody. This is what I think the difference is. When you leave an inheritance to somebody, it's leaving money to somebody, and I've helped a lot of people construct and think critically about that. But it's different than leaving a legacy. So an inheritance is what you leave to somebody, but a legacy is what you leave in somebody. Mm. And so for that reason, Christians just have a different approach. Even when constructing the wills, how do I leave what's important to me, my values in Christ, to the next generation? And actually being so methodical that if they take an exit ramp and abandon some of these values, they get disinherited. So being thoughtful about it. And again, I think Christians need to use a sound mind and construct their wills accordingly, and think about all the financial tools in the marketplace that are available for Christians, and then use them ultimately for the glory of God and to love our neighbor the right way.
I thought of one thing I want to ask somebody on the podcast. Hopefully they're 18 or 23 and they're like, wow, this is cool. Mm-hmm. I like that guy's vest. And he said some cool stuff. But regardless of what age they are, what one or two things should they consider, or questions should they ask trying to hire a guy like you?
Good question. I study a lot of financial advisors that steal. I just did a podcast on Tim Duncan, and he got an advisor stole a lot of money from him. Mm-hmm. So I trust but verify. Mm-hmm. I ask if they're a fiduciary.
Okay.
I ask who's the custodian, because we have to custody money. So those are two questions, and then I think there's a whole nother episode.
Okay.
But fiduciary means that my interest is not being put above your interest. So that's very important, a fiduciary standard. Not always bulletproof, but an important one. Mm-hmm. Legally a fiduciary. Secondly, a custodian means that when you give me money to invest, I actually custody it at Charles Schwab Fidelity, a third party, not in Darryl W. Lyons' account or something that's shady. Mm-hmm. A third-party custodian is really important. And I think those two things are going to be important. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there's all the soft stuff like your fees and your values. I think those are important to unpack. Everyone's going to get paid, and so just understanding how that works.
Yeah. Okay. Great advice. Darryl, thanks again for your time.
That's been fun. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been really cool. And when you write your next book or you get something passionate about, let me know. I'd love to have you back.
Probably be next week.
All right. Thanks again.
Thank you.